Morning, everyone. So, hello. Yes, I was just checking something. Someone put in the comments, Greater Manchester Police have just put out the greatest tweet ever. I'm afraid I don't normally like doing this, but I may just have to quickly show you what it is. Oh, hang on. No, hold on. Let's do it quite quickly. I'll get rid of it. So, ostensibly, it's about drink driving. I'll cover myself up for a moment, it doesn't matter. It says, one night of fun isn't worth a lifetime of regret. Remember, if you get caught drink driving, it's game over. Help keep our roads safe for everyone. 14 years, don't do extra time with us. Bit cheeky. Never mind. Anyway, on to the polling. So we've had lots of MRP polls out this week. 3 MRP polls, one from Survation, then one from Ipsos, and then yesterday one from YouGov, which one we're going to mostly focus on today, I suppose. Not because I'm prioritizing it particularly, because all of the polls are showing the same general trend. There are wildly different results for individual interesting seats amongst the different polls, but in terms of the overall thing, am I any better? I am much better, thank you, Ivan. Yes. So it's like if we look at the YouGov poll, and I've put a link to the latest one in the description below, but just to go through, because YouGov have produced 3 MRP polls this year. They produced their first one early April, just before the local elections. Then they produced one at the start of this month. So that was after, that was covering the first couple of weeks of the general election campaign. And now they've produced another one, which covered, you would say, the next couple of weeks. But what was most interesting is it covered Nigel Farage entering the arena, and of course Rishi Sunak's D-Day gaffe, which is more than a little gaffe. Michael Warner, £2 super chat. Thank you very much. Welcome back. Hope you're better. Yes, I am responding now much better that I've had a diagnosis. So if we look at where things have gone now, I will just say, when you're looking at polls and when you look at the headline results, you look at the seat projections, it's like, okay, Labour are going to win this many, the Tories this many, the Lib Dems this many, SNP this many, and so on. And remember, when you're looking at those seat projections, it doesn't, a lot of these seats are actually being decided by small margins. So remember, if the mathematical model says that the Conservatives are going to win a particular seat by 0.1% of the vote, well, it gives them the win because that's just how the maths is working. But there are lots and lots and lots of seats like I've never seen before that the polls are saying are going to be won by small margins, which actually means probably it's going to be a bit of a lucky dip if any of the polls get their seat projections anything like right when we see the actual results, because there are so many seats that are just really, really close, really tight. Paul Ewan, 199 super chat, thank you. It says buy Phil a recovery pop, thank you. So, but anyway, if we look at the seat projections first of all, so in April, it had Labour down as 403 seats, the Conservatives on 155, and the Lib Dems on 49. So at that point, you're going, that's a 1997 style election. Labour get a landslide. The Tories are absolutely beasted. The Lib Dems, decent number. But it's not remarkable. I mean, it's like a once in a generation type event, but that's it. There's nothing for the history books, really. Then the second MRP, the beginning of June, it had Labour on 422 seats, some more there. The Tories on 140, so it's a drop, and the Lib Dems on 48. So at this point, you were moving more from 1997 to a 1906 style loss, which is also a time when the Tories, over 100 years ago, won a big majority on the back of a culture war. Then it was the Boer War rather than Brexit. Still B, though. It's always a B thing, isn't it? B culture wars. And then they got hammered by the Liberals in 1906. So you're into that territory there. So now the latest MRP has Labour on 425 seats, which is only a little bit more. But the Tories have crashed to 108 and Lib Dems boosted to 67. And again, even then, you think, well, the Tories are still like going to be leading the opposition. But like I said, most of those seats, and I mean most of those seats, are being won by small margins. If you consider how to describe this, so if you're looking at the MRP data tables, because you can get the data tables, they'll open up in Excel. If you're looking at any Conservative seat that's been won by up to 5%, that's within the margin for error. There's always like a 5% uncertainty on a mathematical model. So if it shows that they're only winning it by up to 5%, there's no confidence that they're winning it at all. We don't know. We'll know that some, I mean, they'll not all be wrong, but there'll be the odd seat that it's like, it says they're winning it by 5%. They could be losing it by 5%. And then it's not even like, okay, so once you get to 6%, then it's sort of fairly safe, because then it's like, well, there could be the polling error. And then remember, there's 2 more weeks. You know, what these polls are showing is the situation has been getting worse and worse and worse for the Tories. It got worse from the local elections to the announcement of the general election. It's gotten worse as the general election has gone on. And it can still get worse now. I would argue that if you've got Conservative candidates to say, would you prefer it if the general election was today? I think they would say yes, because I don't think the Conservatives think they're going to make any more gains now. It's all about trying to sort of retain what they've got. I think they're now expecting to be absolutely hammered. They've given up. I mean, you look at the party now. I am actually going to be honest and say I watched Labour's party political broadcast yesterday, and I thought that's a bit. I didn't think it was that great. It's not my sort of thing. Should we put it that way? At the same time, it was still a properly filmed piece specifically for the purpose. So it still served the purpose of a party political. I just didn't necessarily think it was brilliant for myself. I don't know how the public respond to it. But what I will tell you is this: it was at least a properly done piece. Whereas the day before, the Tories brought out a party political that was just a low resolution recording of Laura Trott doing a press conference from last week. So something that was already been published. It wasn't new. It wasn't recorded specifically for it. Then you look at what Rishi Sunak's doing at the moment. You may think, well, Rishi Sunak, you know, I mean, okay, there was the thing with the sheep, but he hasn't really, there's not been any real headlines of Rishi Sunak making a fool of himself recently, is there? And yet, and that is deliberate, because he's now doing very low key campaigning. He's just retreating to, well, not safe areas, because they're no longer safe. They used to be safe. You know, at this stage of a general election campaign, a Conservative leader should not be campaigning in farms. They should not be like appealing to farmers and campaigning in rural areas very much. And yet that's what he's doing, because these are places that are no longer safe. They've completely abandoned this idea of the red wall. But anyway, let's catch up with a few comments if we can find some. Skitch Monkey there saying, I thought my constituency was Tory for a terrible half second there, but when I haven't seen a single Conservative board at all campaign, I had a close look. Thankfully, it's Fools next door. So there is a lot of anecdotal evidence of not nearly as many Conservative boardings going up. You know, like the posts, you'll get people sticking gardens and like posters in windows and things like that in farmers' fields. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence that there's nowhere near as much of that, even in a lot of Conservative areas. And remember, most of the people who take those boards to stick in their gardens, a lot of them are like party members. So these are people who are still going to vote for the Conservatives, but they don't want to stick a thing up in their garden. So it's like, it's embarrassing. So you've got a bit of an issue there where you may well be finding that you've got a lot of people who will still vote Conservative, but they don't really want to point it out to their neighbours because it's embarrassing. It's not a good idea for any Tory to be around the farms, especially the pigs. Well, I did joke because when Rishi Sunak was doing that thing with the sheep, not what you're thinking. David Cameron was with him on that visit, and I did sort of wonder if the sheep were running away from Sunak because the pigs had a word with them. But there we go. The other thing that's happened today is, I don't know if the people have noticed in the news, there's a second Tory candidate that's been caught up in this betting scandal. So we had Rishi Sunak's principal private secretary who put a bet on the July election. So he's been investigated now. Then a police officer that was like in close contact with Rishi Sunak, so it was like one of Rishi Sunak's close police protection officers. He's been arrested. I mean, straight away, he's been arrested, and yet the PPS hasn't been arrested, which means that a police officer is held to a higher standard of behaviour than a government minister, albeit a junior one. But now another Conservative candidate, so it does keep freezing on my screen, but I'm told that the audio is still okay. Another Conservative candidate is being investigated for placing that bet as well. And I think according to Pippa Crer of The Guardian, this one is married to someone who's involved in the campaign. So they didn't necessarily have first-hand knowledge, but they're married to someone who would have done. Tim Beck saying, not seen a single Tory poster in High Peak. I mean, where I am is a Tory area, and I haven't seen any. In fact, I'll tell you what I have had though, which is quite unusual. So where I am in my particular part of the constituency is very Tory, and yeah, so there's been loads of, but the constituency should go Labour. There's been loads of Labour leaflets coming through. There's been one Conservative one, but look at this. Look, it's actually blue, and it says Conservatives on it. I don't know how well you can see it. I should actually look at my thing so I can see it properly. There it is. You can see it. It says Conservative. It says Conservatives caring for you, so it's full of lies. Don't worry. It is a proper Conservative leaflet. But it's in blue, and it says Conservatives. That is remarkable. I saw Jeremy Hunt tweeting today about all the boardings around his constituency. He's fighting a desperate battle to avoid being beaten by the Lib Dems. And they're blue as well, and they say Conservatives on them. So there are a few parts of the country where they are admitting to be Conservatives, just not very many. The Conservative candidate whose husband is the campaign leader. Yes, thank you, Michael. Yeah, I thought it was something like that. Anyway, back onto the polls in terms of what the polls are showing. So what we've got, consistent, because we've had Survation now, Ipsos and YouGov, and they're all saying, in terms of the seat breakdown, they are all saying different things because they're using different methodologies. And yet, like if I go through them quickly, Survation are saying Labour would get 443 seats, Conservatives 83, Lib Dems 53. Ipsos 453 for Labour, that's more for Labour. But Tories 115, Lib Dems on 38. But Ipsos are saying that most of the vast majority of those Tory seats are a complete toss-up. In terms of the seats they think are likely, it reckons the Tories are only going to get a couple more than the Lib Dems. It's just that the Lib Dems are slightly leaning towards lots of toss-ups. So, I mean, that's the thing, you see. It's a really small amount of tactical voting push that's needed, just a really small amount now. We're at the point where the polls are saying that the Lib Dems can finish second, but they're not currently likely to. It's almost there. It's like if you're reaching out for this prize, you've got your fingertips on it, but it's not, you haven't got a grasp of it. You have to reach a bit more. Anyway, a couple of quick super chats. Tinkernator, £10, thank you. It says, I sense a lot of disillusionment in my local community when canvassing. They either lost faith in politics altogether or think Labour will win anyway, so won't bother voting. It's tragic stuff to see. That is a worry of mine, because in all honesty, yes, Labour are going to win, and they're going to win a healthy majority. What I would like to say to these people is, particularly those who are disillusioned with politics, because that is very understandable, and it's impossible for Labour to prove that they're different until they're in government. So Labour can do nothing about, I mean, they can say anything, but it's like they recognise that people won't believe them until, I mean, Starmer said that in his party political last night. people won't believe it until they see it, and they can't see it until he's in government. And even then, they're going to have to give him a few years. But what I would say is this election is not about changing the government. That's going to be done. It's about changing politics. So for people who are disillusioned with politics, ask those people this. This is the line I would use against them. So Labour are very likely, obviously, if you're canvassing, you can't be saying, oh yeah, Labour are definitely going to win. But you can say Labour are very likely to win. The polls all suggest that. But who do you want holding them to account? Do you want it to be the Conservatives or the Lib Dems? Because that's what this is about. And remember, if you want the Lib Dems to be holding Labour's feet to the fire, it's not just about do you live in a Lib Dem Conservative area. It's not just about the Lib Dems getting as many seats as possible. That is obviously a big part of it. The Lib Dems cannot win enough seats to overtake the Tories on their own. We also need to cost the Tories as many seats as possible against other parties, mostly Labour, not exclusively Labour. The Greens are on for at least one. They've got a good chance against one Conservative seat. The SNP have got a few. Plaid have got one, I think. But nonetheless, we need to reduce the number of Tory MPs and boost the number of Lib Dem MPs. So that's what I would be asking those people. Who do you want holding Labour's feet to the fire, Lib Dems or Tories? And if you want it to be the Lib Dems, that's the contest. Cathal to Euro Super Chat, thank you, says, went to my first meeting last night, now Area Pro. Okay. Sam £5 says, ironically, Tories tweeted yesterday afternoon, if you bet on Labour, you can never win. Dan Hodges' worst campaign ever. Oh, Dan Hodges is like, he's losing his mind over how bad it is. It's quite hilarious to watch. He's absolutely losing his. He was, do you know, remember, Dan Hodges was the one who was talking about hung parliaments for ages. Last year's local elections, he was the one who was going on for ages. Oh, hung parliament, hung parliament, hung parliament. This year, after the local elections, when everyone else was doing it, he says, don't be stupid, it's ridiculous. And people pointed out to me, you were doing this last year. But he's lost his mind. Ivan Ambrose, thank you, 1999 super chat. Sunak's in for an absolutely rough time at the Leaders Programme BBC Question Time this evening. Unlike previous debates, the audience will have more of a say, and rightly so. Elections are about the public. Yeah, I noticed the Green Party are not happy that they're included. And given that Question Time, it normally has 5 people on it, doesn't it? So I actually think they've got a fair grievance. I'm trying to think of justifications for it. I suppose one justification is if you put the Greens on, do you have to put Reform UK? Because if you don't, Nigel Farage is going to bellyache. But I would argue that I would argue that the Green Party are more established and that they have won Westminster seats. Reform UK have never won a Westminster seat. But anyway, it's what it is. Johnny Copperhead does a £5 super chat there as well, saying Tory round here using green coloured leafleting. Yeah, that's quite common. No mention of Conservatives apart from his email address in a very small writing at the bottom. Yeah, we need to actually I think it will happen because Labour have talked a lot about reforming politics, and there's so many things we need to do. There has to be a review into misleading campaign practices. There must be a review, and as quickly as possible, because it's not about the next general election. We've got local elections again next year. So, we need to start doing things like that. Graham there said, I don't know who's going to be more inconsolable on July the 5th, Dan Hodges or Owen Jones. I think Dan Hodges has come to terms with it already. It's Owen Jones who'll be crying. Pray for Laura Kunsberg. Yeah. Maybe she could emigrate. Someone else might want to send her off to Fox News. Colin saying, could we please not use the phrase supermajority, which refers to a veto-free vote in the USA landslide? Well, this is the thing the Tories are using. They're talking about a Labour supermajority. The term is meaningless in the UK. Constitutionally, there's no such thing as a supermajority. Absolutely. There are in other countries. In some countries, for example, a supermajority will allow you to make constitutional changes. Not in this country. In this country, you either have a majority or you do not. Now, granted, there is a difference between a technical majority, like a majority of one MP, because that's not a real majority, because you'll have rebels in your party, or just an MP who's not a rebel, but there's a particular local issue where they have a beef with your legislation. So, you can't rely on absolutely all your MPs voting in line with the whip all the time. So you need a bit more. Realistically, if you've got the number I usually use is 370 MPs, which is actually more than the Conservatives won in 2019. We say that Boris Johnson won a large majority in 2019. He had 365 MPs to begin with, which is fine. That's fine. I tend to say about 370. 370 covers you. 400 luxury. 400 means not only can you get whatever you want through, you can get it through quickly if you need to as well. Because sometimes, even if you're sure of the numbers, you may have to, things can get slowed down with possible amendments and things like that. So, but there you go. Any chance of Labour bringing in a constitution? Like, okay, we have a constitution. What you mean is a codified constitution. I think there are a great many problems with something like that. Now, if you read Gordon Brown's paper that Keir Starmer commissioned a while ago, he talks about something, he doesn't specifically mention it, but if you read the whole paper, it does read like that. But at the same time, I think he was going over outside his remit there a little bit. So I strongly suspect not. You're saying the Workers' Party stand at 154 candidates supporting lots of independents. They will win some seats. No, they won't. No, they won't. The only one of them who has any chance of winning anything, maybe George Galloway. I don't know. I haven't seen a constituency poll for Rochdale. The MRP polls give him no chance, but that's an MRP poll. They probably can't account for him. I'd like to see a constituency poll, but they're not going to win. They're not going to win MPs. Deluding yourself. You're talking about, these are the people who actually ran the Labour Party. They had control of the largest political party in Europe and failed to win 2 general elections against very poor quality Conservative opponents. The idea that these people can win with independence is for the birds. Absolutely for the birds. Still won't pass PR, Phil. You wait and see. You wait and see. Yes, we're going to. I mean, obviously, we need that external pressure. What we don't need is a load of people going, "Oh, well, Labour won't bring it in anyway, so there's no point." No, if you put the work in, it's there. There's people there calling for it. There are Tory candidates openly calling for electoral reform during the campaign. There's going to be way more after it. When Angry Pagan saying Labour's manifesto seems to have forgotten some. Economists mildly, gotten some economists mildly enthusiastic, something about a possible return to Keynesianism, the work of Maynard Keynes. I mean, we will see, but obviously, I mean, Keynes just makes sense for any Labour government because this trickle-down theory nonsense, no Labour government's ever gone along with that trickle-down crap, because that's all it is. Maggie Pie, 20 Swedish krona, I think that is, made the Tories go back to the Victorian era. Well, they've been trying to drag us back to the Victorian era. Trying to drag us back. When Phil said luxury just now, I was reminded of the Four Yorkshiremen sketch. Well, we've got a similar accent. Except I'm a proper Yorkshire. None of them were proper Yorkshiremen. They were just faking it. Captain Bart Roberts, £5 super chat, thank you. It says, I'm still giggling about 40 plus candidates of Reform UK being actual Facebook friends with the fascist leader. Well, yeah, it's absolutely insane. I mean, this is the thing as well. Nigel Farage reckons we should trust him to run the country. And yet, think about what he's claiming he's done this week. And he's claiming this. He is claiming that he gave £144,000 to a company to vet his candidates. But this company, when people checked, clearly states on their website they're not a vetted company. They provide tools so that you can do it yourself. So you're basically buying a registration to you. It's a bit like if I say I pay a subscription to Adobe, right? So I get the full Adobe suite. I particularly use Adobe Premiere Pro to do my video editing. It's a bit like me paying my Adobe subscription and then complaining that they're not editing my videos. How stupid would I look? And yet Nigel Farage has done this. He's paid a company that's not a vetting company to vet his candidates. He's now saying they haven't vetted his candidates, and he's complaining about that. It's like, well, we don't do that. It's like going into a Chinese restaurant and complain they won't give you a Big Mac. The man's an idiot, and yet he reckons we should. And the media don't point this out. And do you know what? The Tories don't point this out. The Tories should have been all over that. Reform UK are stealing more votes off the Tories right now, because obviously they've lost the central vote. They've lost most of the moderate central votes. They've gone. They haven't even chased after them. So, you know, I mean, it's an utter madness, isn't it? They should have been attacking Nigel Farage and Reform UK, but they're far too scared to. They should have been all over it. They should have been ridiculing him. Nigel Farage, he reckons he's going to have a steady hand on the tiller, and yet look at this cock up. He paid £144,000 to get his candidates vetting. His candidates didn't get vetted because the company engaged don't do vetting. That's Chris Grayling level stupidity, that is, when he was the one who hired those ferries from a company that has no experience providing ferries and didn't have any ferries. So hoping that vetted company sue Nigel Farage be hilarious. Well, he reckons he's going to sue them. I mean, they're not going to sue him. Why would they sue him? He reckons he's going to sue them. That'd be hilarious. I suspect he's not going to. I mean, okay, people looked up, they say they're not a vetting company. There is a possibility maybe that he got them to do a special deal. You provide the staff to do it, but then why would you? Because they're just going to charge you extra. Why don't you just pay for your own staff? It's so ridiculous. Seeing the words "we'll work with scientists and experts" so many times in the Labour manifesto is really good to see for me. There's Adobe owns my computer now. Those are the terms and conditions. Yeah, I read about that. I don't produce any what you would call original artwork or anything. So, you know, good luck with that. There's absolutely no way he paid that. If it was paid at all, some Russian donor would pay for it. Well, I mean, you know, who knows? Who knows? But nonetheless, it's objectively ridiculous that Nigel Farage has made a complete fool of himself this week, and the Tories are not all over it, when he's the one they fear the most. And then they've got this easy line of attack on him, and they're not even using it. Absolutely ridiculous. Mad. Someone's quoting Raab there. Wow, Dover's really near Calais. Yeah, Raab's going. I mean, he's not even a candidate. He's gone. Forget him. He's got himself a nice, cushy little job in excess of 100 grand a year, mecking an arse in someone else's company now. But there it is. Some countries are already too late to say from climate change. We need to prepare for the migrants, refugees from those places, as well as helping our own by building our housing and infrastructure. Yeah, well, this will be the problem, isn't it? We are going to, because obviously immigration, I don't think there is any such thing as a country that is like, you know, that would be really very pro-immigration or, you know, asylum. We are talking about asylum in this particular case. But there are countries that accept way more than we do. Doesn't matter about the government. There is always going to be a game of pass the parcel when it comes to our asylum obligations, because, you know, unfortunately, there's a great deal of misinformation that works on the British public here. But certainly, if we build up housing and public services to the point where people cannot complain that they're stuck in a queue, then at that point, you massively diminish this argument against asylum seekers and just immigrants in general. Ivan Ambrose 199 Super Chat says, what do I reckon the turnout will be like, Phil? I honestly have no idea. So I'll go through what I know, which is not very much. So first of all, we've had the news that the number of registrations for this election is down by about a fifth compared to 2019. Now, excuse me, that sounds bad, but it isn't necessarily bad. Couple of things that could change the context, and I don't know the answer to this. First of all, it may just be, because you don't have to register for each election, it may just be a lot of people have been registering for the local elections that have led up to it. So if we've had more people registering with those local elections, it may be that not as many had to register for these ones. Another thing it could be, again, excuse me, there's not been many older people registering for them. Now, I can't compare that with 2019. It may be that most of the people not registering are the ones who would ordinarily vote Conservative. So from that point of view, it could be all right. In terms of turnout, there's another massive elephant in the room, and that is voter ID. There may be a load of people turn up to vote and cannot vote. It's now too late to register for a postal vote. The deadline for that was yesterday. So basically, anyone who's not registered to vote cannot now vote for this general election. Anyone who has not applied for a postal vote cannot do that either. What people need to do is go around to people you know and check that their voter ID is fine. If it's not, they've got until the 26th to apply for the voter authority certificate, but don't leave it. That's less than a week away. Don't leave it till then, because on the same date, you can apply for a proxy vote. So if someone is thinking to themselves, right, because it's actually a pain in the arse getting the voter authority certificate. If anyone's thinking to themselves, right, I don't have my voter ID, but I am registered, I want to vote. If there's someone they trust to use the vote that they want, you've got until next Wednesday to set them up as a proxy vote for you. And make sure, obviously, they've got the right voter ID. Otherwise, they'll snooker both of your vote. Maggie Pie, 20 Swedish krona. How could Reform UK steal the moderate Tory vote? They can't. They can't. That's this nonsense about Nigel Farage taking over the Conservative Party. He can't. There was a poll done by YouGov this week that asked Conservative voters who they preferred, Nigel Farage or Keir Starmer. It was split. Nigel Farage can only appeal to those sorts of very authoritarian, anti-immigration, what you might call far right, but not always. There are some other votes he can attract as well. He cannot attract the One Nation Conservative with a small c votes. Can't attract those. So Reform UK can't steal those votes. Lib Dems and Labour have been taking those votes off the Tories. All those people are just staying at home and not voting for anyone. Reform UK are not taking those votes. They're taking the votes on their right. But there we go. So last super chat in there before we have to call it. Bad Bones, £2. Thank you very much. Glad you feel better. A bit better, by the way, Phil. Be well. I will attempt to be well. Thank you very much. So we will leave it there. Thanks for coming on, everyone. Have a great day. And until next time, I'll see you later.